How did this person's gruesome discovery of this presidential relative impact the way that you and I receive medical care today? The truth may surprise you. This is John Scott Harrison. Now, he doesn't have great name recognition, but members of his family do. He's the great-grandson of Benjamin Harrison V, who was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and also he was Virginia governor. He's also the son of the 9th U.S. president, William Harrison, Old Tippecanoe. Harrison was the oldest elected president. William Harrison was the oldest elected president at the time, at 68 years of age. He gave the longest inaugural speech in U.S. history that people had to sit through for 2 hours. But he's also the shortest serving U.S. president, who died just 32 days into office. But John Scott Harrison is also the father of the 23rd U.S. president, Benjamin Harrison. So let me tell you about the death of John Scott Harrison. Died in 1878. He was 73 years of age at the time. They buried him in his family plot in North Bend, Ohio. But the day of the burial, family members realized that a grave right there in the graveyard, in the plot, one had been disturbed, and it was actually his nephew, John Scott Harrison's nephew, Augustus Devine, who had just died recently of tuberculosis. And he had been buried earlier in the week. Now his grave was disturbed. In fact, his body was missing. So the Harrison family took every step they could to protect their father's grave. They dug a deep grave. They bricked it up on the insides of the grave there. They placed a casket. They placed a stone that took 16 men to carry and placed it on top of the casket. They poured cement in, and then they hired a night watchman or a guard for the next 30 days to look after his grave. And I'll tell you why they did that and why that wasn't uncommon back during that time. John Harrison Jr. and his cousin George Eaton set out to find the remains of their cousin, Augustus Devine. And so they obtained a search warrant, and with some local police officers, they showed up at the most obvious place, the Ohio Medical College there in Cincinnati. And while they were searching the dark, musty basement there, John Harrison Jr. discovered a corpse hanging from a rope. John Harrison Jr. here removed the cover over the corpse and was horrified at what he discovered. Now, it wasn't his cousin, Augustus Devine. It was far worse. It was the worst nightmare that any family could face. The Cincinnati Commercial Tribune describes John Harrison's horrific discovery best when they said, "Harrison with eyes starting from their sockets shrank almost in fear from the awful spectacle that was presented. He had before him the corpse of his own father, whom he had entombed only 20 hours before." The press took off with this story as these details began to unfold, and they referred to it as the Harrison Horror. And you know, this is amazing to think about. From the time that it had taken them to bury their father, John Scott Harrison, and John Harrison Jr. then traveling to Cincinnati looking for the remains of his cousin, Augustus Devine, someone had eluded the night watchman or the guard, stole the body of John Scott Harrison, took it to Cincinnati, and sold it to the Ohio Medical College, all within a 24-hour period, right under their nose. Body snatching was a common problem back in the 19th century. And medical colleges back then paid for fresh cadavers for medical students to study, to dissect. This was the way they learned. And by doing this, it created a demand. And so grave robbers would go out, they were sometimes referred to as resurrectionists, they would go out looking for a quick payday. And back in the 1870s, they would oftentimes be paid, on average, about $25 per body, which would equate to about $600 today. But the dean of the medical college completely denied having any knowledge of the theft of John Scott Harrison's body. And he said no school officials or medical students had even touched the body yet. Now, Benjamin Harrison at this time was 44 years of age. He was a prominent lawyer in Indianapolis, Indiana, and he wrote an open letter that was published confronting the dean of the Ohio Medical College. And he basically called him out and basically called him a liar. The carotid artery in Harrison's neck had been cut and his blood drained. He had been embalmed. Somebody with some medical knowledge had worked on the body. And then Harrison got personal in the letter. And he said, while he, talking about his father, John Scott Harrison, lay upon your table the long white beard which the hands of infant grandchildren had often stroked in love was rudely shorn from his face. Now, Benjamin Harrison later filed a civil suit against the medical college. We don't know what the findings were. All of those records were later lost in a courthouse file there in Hamilton County in 1884. But, you know, the aftermath of this Harrison horror, this disturbing incident in U.S. history helped reshape, to some degree, the medical science as we know it today, and the direction that medical science took. In an effort to discourage demand for fresh cadavers and to discourage grave robbers for looking for a quick buck, the state of Ohio stepped in and in 1881 passed the Ohio Anatomy Law of 1881. And there were 4 other states that later joined in and amended their anatomy laws. And they increased the penalties for grave robbing to try and discourage it. And then they stepped in and they told these medical schools that they would provide unclaimed bodies for medical research. And so people that were paupers, or people that were homeless, or people that were orphans, or people that were in state prisons who didn't have family members step in and claim their bodies upon their death, they would then be given to these medical colleges so they could continue their medical study and their medical research. And so today, medical colleges and universities depend upon people that donate their bodies to medical science, and they continue this practice of, in many cases, donating unclaimed bodies so that medical research, so that the doctors that we deal with today have had that experience of being able to work on cadavers in medical school, which helps further their education. So I bet you're wondering, did they ever find the cousin, Augustus Devine? And the answer is, they did. They found him in a vat of brine at the medical college at the University of Michigan. Did you learn something new? Did you get value from what you watch? Do me a huge favor. Give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't joined our Prez Politics family yet by subscribing, do that now. And most importantly, share our videos with your friends and family.